And for that, you have Azure Virtual Networks. So this enables your Azure resources to communicate with each other, the internet or the on-premises network. So creating a virtual network is like maybe if there are two machines which are within a single virtual network, they can obviously communicate with each other. And if you want to like separate those two machines, then you can obviously keep them in different virtual networks where the traffic for them will not be able to communicate with it. Okay, additionally, you can also create virtual private network gateways. So if you are looking for some VPN solutions, so that is also there. So mostly your VPNs, they will send encrypted traffic from your on-premises network with the Azure virtual network. So from your on-premises network, if you want to actually uh, through the internet only, you are accessing your service, but what you can do, you can at least encrypt that traffic through the virtual private network gateways or your VPNs. And then there is some service, there is one Azure Express Route. So this extends your on-premises networks into Azure over a private connection. So there is a dedicated link that is created in Azure Express Route for you. So that is a difference between an VPN and Azure Express Route. So it will also connect from your on-premises network over your to your Azure cloud platform, but that the backbone or the underlying end-to-end connectivity and everything will travel over the Azure backbone network only. So that is known as Azure Express Route. Okay, so let us go to the lab for creating a virtual network. Yeah, so first thing, this is the lab for this thing in module to create a virtual network. Okay, we have to go into the portal. So I've already logged into the portal. Yeah, so this is the portal. Okay, so first what we have to do, we have to actually from the all services, we have to check for virtual networks, and then we will create a virtual network. Later on, what we have to do, we have to create two virtual machines, and we will put them both in a single virtual network, and then through ICMP packets, we'll see whether I'm able to ping another virtual machine in the same virtual network. Okay, so this is the agenda of this lab. So first, let me go ahead and create a virtual network. Yeah, so second one, click on create. I will choose my subscription. So I have this DP203 subscription. I'll choose the resource group that I had created yesterday. I will give this a name, VNet1. Okay, and then I'll simply click on review and create. I'll check for validation whether it is passed or not. So this has passed. I'll click on create. Okay, meanwhile, it won't take much time to provision. Okay, after this, what we have to do, we have to create two virtual machines. So just like we did yesterday, but this time when in the networking tab, we will actually mention the virtual network that we had created. So we'll be creating two virtual machine, and we'll keep them in a single network only. So I guess this should be created now. Yeah, so this is created. Okay, after this, I'll be creating a virtual machine. Yeah, so you can have any sort of image that you want to have on the machine. So they're actually using Windows Server 2019. So we'll use the same image, and this is the username password that we are that will be used for RDP login and other things. So let me go back to. I'll use the same resource group here. I'll give this name VM1. Okay, I'll use the same username and password. Okay, in like I will also like allow 80 and 33388 port. So basically, one of them is used for your, because it's a web server, so port 80 should be open, and RDP 3389 uh, is used for your RDP connection, your remote desktop client. Okay, disk and all everything. I'll keep this as like common for networking. So in the virtual network tab, so you can see so there is a VNet already in this particular resource group, my VNet. So I will use the same virtual network, and then subnet and other things we can keep the same, just like this thing. So you can see that okay, we had used this. So I will. There should be VNet one. Okay, and okay, why is this not showing the VNet 2? Okay, I guess this the virtual network was not created. Let me check whether, yeah, so there is a virtual network in this resource group itself. Okay, this is not selected, that is why. There should be a VNet. Yeah, VNet 1 is there. Okay. Okay, now I'll go ahead and create a new virtual machine. Yeah, I'll give this any name as of now. Okay, so I'll use this network only, VNet 1 only. And next I'll click on review and create. Yeah, now it has started creating the virtual machine. Next also I'll create one more virtual machine, keep it under the same virtual network. Yeah, so this is creating. Okay, so this is taking some time. Additionally, okay, what is the reason behind? Okay, so there is some error at Azure side. So let me try again. Let me create one more virtual machine. Let me delete these first. Okay, this is in still creating state. Okay, so let me delete all the machines first. Yeah, okay, now let me, this has failed. I will create one more same virtual machine. There was some issue at your end. Maybe VM3. Just use. Yeah, so now you can see that my like new virtual network that I had created, this is also registered. At that time, I guess there was some issue, so it was not showing up. And let me click on review and create. I hope it does not fail this time. So the validation is also passed. Let me click on create. So this is deploying. Let it deploy this time. Let me see if there are any questions so far. There are two machines already. Okay, okay, sorry, Pradyuman. Actually, I guess I deleted those also. So we'll connect offline, Pradyuman, regarding that because I selected all the machines and yeah. So this time, if you see the virtual machine was successfully deployed. Let me create another VM now. So I'll just first check whether VM3 is deployed or not. So it is deployed in our virtual. You can see the virtual network that I've selected is the one that I created in the starting of the lab. I'll go ahead and create one more virtual machine. I'll call this VM4. Let me keep it in East US only. Okay, now let's move to disk networking. I'll choose the same virtual network that I've linked VM3 with, and let me click on review and create. Yeah, let me click on create. This will. Yeah, so the second virtual machine is also getting deployed. Okay, post this what we have to do. So once we are done with this thing, we actually have to test the connection from like from one of the virtual machine. We'll try to ping the other virtual machine. So for that, we first we will have to log in into the RDP connection, and then we will have to just like ping. We will actually enable network and location and Windows firewall, and then we will ping VM2, and it should be successfully able to ping the other virtual machine. So what we have done, we have created two virtual machines, kept them in a single virtual network, and then through the ping mechanism, we can see that they are able to communicate uh, with each other over like the internet. Sorry, over the virtual network. Okay, so this is still creating. Meanwhile, okay, yeah. So let me go to the resource group. Should be in the K21. Yeah, so we have VM3. Let me just sort it by the type of. Okay, I think so. I created the other virtual machine in some other resource group. Okay, I'll download the IDP file. Now I'll go inside the virtual machine. Yeah, this is the same password. Okay, we are okay. So we are in the virtual machine now. The next step that we have to take is we have to actually locate the firewall settings. So for that, you can uh, so uh, so what we did that we have logged into the machine, and so for the secure certified warning, like we have to connect. So all you have to do is you have to just click yes, and it will bypass that thing. Okay, and in each of the virtual machines, we have to disable public and private firewall. By For that, you have to go into the start menu, settings, network internet connection, and locate your Windows firewall. So we have to disable both your public and private firewall. Okay, so let me. Under your settings, Okay, there. Okay, so the firewall, because the firewall is not disabled, so you can see the request has been timed out. So first, what we have to do is we have to disable the firewall. So I will like turn off both the firewalls. Okay, this is for VM4. I have to do it for the other VM also. So let me just get out of this VM. Uh, I'll log in into VM4 now. Okay, so this portal is quite slow today. Yeah, so for VM4 now, what I'll do, I'll go ahead and disable the firewalls. Yes, this is the password for VM4. This is booting up. Yeah. So now from the settings option, we'll search for firewall. Yeah, and we'll disable both the private. Okay, now from the VM4 itself, let me try to ping VM3. Yeah, so let me try. There is some issue with Azure today. Okay, this is not allowing me to type. Okay, okay. Now let me close these things. So you can see that this time I was able to, after disabling the firewall, because both of these virtual machine are in a single virtual network, I was able to like ping both of those machines. So, but there is some Windows Defender actually does not allows you to do that. So that is why we have to actually disable all firewall, your public as well as private firewall, and these are actually ICMP packets that are sent. So there is some security restriction. That is why we have to first disable this the public as well as a private firewall, and then it will be able to communicate between different VMs also. Okay, so this was pretty. Yeah, after this, all we have actually successfully checked whether we are able to communicate between two virtual machines within a single private network. Okay, after this, you have Azure storage services. So for your storage services, so there mostly you will have three types of storage. First will be your container storage, that is known in Azure as blob storage. So whenever you come across this word blob, it will be for binary data. So you can store anything starting from unstructured data. It could be text, it could be videos, binary, CSV, Parquet, whatever you can think of. These are simply blobs. And these days, even your data lakes and other things, so, they are known as Gen 2 in Azure terminology. So your data lake is also a type of a blob storage where you can maintain data from any place, be it your unstructured, structured, even your semi-structured data. Okay, then you have your disk storage. So disk storage is nothing but whatever the disk that is needed by your virtual machines and application. So you can have disk storage also as a storage service. And then I guess all of us would have worked with the file shares once in a while. So there are company owned within your organization also in your on premises system. So they will have some sort of a file share where across the organization we maintain all the files. So similar to that, Azure has created one service which is known as Azure Files, which creates a very highly available network file share system, and this is actually accessed over standard server message blocks. So there is a protocol, SMB protocol, SMB 3.0. This is a protocol that is used by Azure Files for your network file storage system that you have. So you can actually mount this. You can have a file share, then maybe you can mount that file share over your own virtual machine also, and then you can just like you used to work in your in your own organization. You can work that way also. Okay, now if you have a storage, within your storage, there should be some access tiers also. So storage is a cost, guys, these days. So, but you all the time you don't need to store a thing in the best of the storage technologies. So that is why what you can do, you can classify your type of storage that you have into hot, cool, or archive tiers. Now, the benefit of this thing will be if you classify something as hot, then what will happen that it will be optimized for storing data that is accessed frequently. So if you need to have some data which you need to access very quickly, so obviously you will prefer keeping it on a storage which is of premium quality and other things. So what happens is Azure will actually keep this uh, data in a storage which can be accessed very frequently. Then comes your cool tier. So this is optimized for storing data that is infrequently accessed and stored for at least 30 days. So if you have data which will be there for even for an entire month, but maybe it will not be accessed so frequently, then you can keep it in a cool tier. Okay, then additionally they also have an archive tier. So this archive tier gives you the cost for the least amount of cost for storage will be there in your access archive access tier. So if you'll see most of the times in your compliance and other things, what happens is you have to maintain your maybe your customers data for 7 years or maybe 12 years or maybe 20 years. So maybe that data will never be accessed actually, but somewhere given the compliance and other things, you will have to keep them for some duration of time. Now, keeping that data in any operational transactional data store is very expensive. Keeping them in a maybe SQL database or in your even in your EDW and other places, it is very costly. So a better storage platform for them is on your blob storage or your data lake, which are like binary storage. Where but what you will do instead of storing them as an hot or cool tier, you will actually store them as an archive tier. So what will happen, that data that is very large in size, but you won't be able to, you won't pay so much for the same data because you have already classified that as an archive tier, and Azure will maintain it at a place, maybe a less cheaper storage option. They will keep that data, but the downside of this thing will be that it will not be so frequently accessible, like compared to your hot or cool tier. Okay, so this is the usage of access tiers in your Azure. Okay, the next lab is around creating a blob storage. So uh, before I'll take you to the labs now. So all your storage solutions that you have, they actually lie inside of a single storage account. So yeah, let me just go to the drawing board. I'll just show that to you. What is a storage account, how it is linked. Guys, can you do we require any specific admin access to create VM accesses? Or so Junaid, see purpose of connecting one VM with, okay, Jen, so let me, yeah, there are some questions, I guess. Yeah, Junaid, you can change the region for resources, so you can like in your VM you can decide which region you want to actually create your resource. Yeah, Junaid, you can do that. You can have, they can be in different virtual networks. One could be in each. What is username and password I need to select for administrative account while creating? So this is the username and password, Shavanti, that is used for your to connect from your RDP to your virtual machine. Just like any, if you're connecting to any VDI or other things, you need some user and password name using which you will authenticate to that virtual machine. So that is the username and password that we set. Can we spread our resources across two VM and share our work between? Okay, so what is the purpose of connecting two VM? So we were just trying to show uh, if you would have seen your on-premises networks, guys, what used to happen that all your systems are within your single virtual network. So they are actually privately laid out that way. So similarly, we are simulating the same thing on cloud. That was the agenda of this thing. So you can ping machines, and there are various softwares and network softwares which you can like install through which you will be able to monitor your network, all the virtual machines that are connected to that network. So you can do all of that stuff once you have all your virtual machine in a particular virtual network. Okay, I guess Jayant, I've answered your question. Do we require any specific admins to create VMs? Junaid, yeah, most of the time you will see your maybe DevOps guys or your administrator will do these things for you. But it totally depends on you whether you need these levels of access for your work. So maybe somebody will give you, but most of the time this creating of resources and other things, they are taken care by your administrator or maybe your DevOps guys. Shavanti, this is not your Azure account username password. It is for your micro. It's just like a username password that you set for your own laptop. Okay, I guess that answers your question. Yeah, it is where it has nothing to do with Azure account username. What you are doing, you are creating a virtual machine. You are actually giving maybe some login credential to it. Then because actually this virtual machine is not physically available. So for that we are actually downloading an RDP client, and through that RDP client, the credentials that you have actually created at the time of creating, we are using to log into that virtual machine. I guess now it will be crystal clear, guys. Okay, yeah. So yeah, so prior to this, I wanted to, even though this is not part of your course, but you still, you guys should know this thing. So if we talk about Azure storage solution, so what will happen most of the so in your Azure storage solution, what will happen is you will have a storage account. Okay, and within this storage account, you will have all those things. You will have a blob storage also, your file storage also. Okay, so just ignore this. So you will have a file storage also, like your file shares. There is one more storage. It's not part of your AZ900, but queue storage, like creating queues. Queues is a messaging sort of a system which is used in organization for maybe sending in message into a queue, and then there will be a listener which will be listening those messages. So for that you have queue storage, and then at last you have this table storage also. So here you maintain data in key value pairs, or like create like having JSON data also. Okay, so but for all of these storage, first you need to create a storage account. Okay, within this storage account you get this capability that you can have blob, file, queue, or table type of storage. Okay, so all your Azure storage services are actually linked to your storage account. So that is why first we will have to, because there was no mention of this thing, so I thought that I should tell you this thing. Okay, now where is this exercise? Yeah, it is yeah, create blob storage. Okay, so in this thing, first we have to create a storage account, and then inside the storage account, what we will do, we will create a new blob container. It will be a storage location for us where we can upload any blob, or I can work with any blob. Okay, let me just copy this name. Yeah, so first we'll create a storage account. Yeah, I'll use my resource group. I'll give this storage account a name. And for redundancy, I'll keep it local redundant storage only. You don't need to focus. The cheapest option is your local redundant storage. So your no replication and other things will happen if you choose for LRS. But if it was a very critical storage account where you are maintaining your data, maybe I will go for geo redundant storage, zone redundant storage, or geo zone redundant type of storage. But because it's just demo, then for that purpose, I'm creating an LRS type of a server. Okay, after this, I don't think so we have to do any configurations, and we can simply go ahead and review and create the storage account. So now this will create a storage account. Once my storage account gets created, then inside that storage account, I will create a blob container. So the deployment is in progress. Yeah, so we have created the storage account. Now, if you see here, you can see the data storage option. So there are four types of data storage option. You have containers, which are like your blob storage. Then you have your file shares, you have queues, and you have tables. Okay, queues is just like if you want to create some sort of a messaging system, then you have queue storage for that. File share is just like your network file system that I guess most of you would be familiar with. Containers uh, uh, are like your file systems where you can have your put any type of data. It could be any binary data, text, music, any type of data could be here. And then you have one type of storage. It's known as table storage, where you can maintain some sort of key value paired way of storing things. Okay, so in the exercise we have to focus on containers. So if you go through this thing, so here what we have to do in the once we are in the storage account in the container section, we have to create a new container. We will give this new container one name. So let me just click on container. So this has created a new container for me, and now within this container I can like upload, or I can like upload any for like I'll upload any image. Oopsie. Maybe let me download this thing. Yeah, now I can click on upload, and so from my desktop. Okay, I should have kept that a good name, but yeah, this is the, you can click on upload. So you can see that I now it now the storage is available at least. And like going forward, if you'll go deep into Azure, most of the time what will happen, all your files that you need for processing and other things will come inside your storage account. Okay, and then in your blob containers, and then you will connect to different compute services like maybe your Azure functions. There are other Spark-based services that are getting popular, which will read those data, build that logic, and you can create your application like this way. So first thing for any platform will be to have a place where you can maintain your data. So for that we have storage account, and there is a different type of storage account which is known as Gen2, uh, which has some additional benefits like hierarchical namespace and other things, which is not part of AZ900, but which will give you a better, more feel of a like a data lake or thing. It looks similar to like this. It's just that instead of containers, you have like folders there. Yeah. Okay. Then what we had to do. So we have already seen this thing. We have uploaded the blob also. Within your storage account, you have diagnose and solve problem section where you can actually see what is the monitoring and all of these things. So all of those details are also present. So yeah, so here you can see your diagnose and solve problem. So currently there are no, if you face any, if there were any health problems with these services going on, they all will be present here. Okay, and then you have a monitoring section also. It is somewhere here only. Yeah, so in your monitoring inside, you can actually look at your storage account inside that. What is the transaction? What is availability? So currently there was no downtime for this storage account. So this is the it is 100% available. Then what is your latency, end-to-end latency, and all of these metrics are there. So you can explore all of these metrics in the portal itself. Okay. So after this, we are done with this exercise. Okay, and if you guys are actually doing simultaneously, if you guys are actually also working on the labs, just make sure that at the end of the day, what you do, you delete the resource groups also. Okay, because then you will you will have some additional cost associated with it. Okay, after this, we will have to create a SQL database. Okay, after Azure Storage Solution, you have your SQL databases, like database services. So first comes your Azure Cosmos DB. So Cosmos is a multi-model type of a globally distributed data service. So when I say multi-model, this is nowhere in this slide, but for your more information, within Cosmos, you can have graph database, you can have plain SQL type of a database, you can have MongoDB type of a database. So there are 3, 4 types of different database services which you can have within a single database service. So that is why it is known as multi-model. So if you will have to migrate maybe your MongoDB from your on-premises onto Azure Cosmos DB, then you can just lift and like migrate the data, and all your APIs and all your applications won't need any code changes also. Only the URL for the service will change. Okay. Similarly, then you have Azure SQL database. It is a relational database as a service, and it will have the most stable version of the Microsoft SQL Server. So your Azure SQL databases are always on the latest version of your SQL Server. Then they no doubt Azure has also Azure PaaS services for MySQL and PostgreSQL also. So PostgreSQL is the open source Postgres database engine that is there, and all of these databases that you see are fully managed databases. So they are PaaS services. So no patching your database updates, and platform is managed by your vendor, that is Azure. Okay, now within Azure, you have there is something that is known as Azure SQL Managed Instance. So what the benefit of Azure SQL Managed Instance is, it exactly looks like your on-premises DB. It will have almost 100. It should have almost 100% features that are supported in your on-premises system, which is not the case with your Azure SQL databases and all of these databases. There might be some features that are currently not supported on them, but the moment you move to Azure SQL Managed Instance, so here you get fully managed and evergreen platform as a service. So it is a lift and shift solution for your on-premises application, and most of the time you will see that organizations are actually using managed instance also because obviously for the they provide you almost 100% compatibility with your database service. So because migrating databases and other things, so these are very uh, difficult and time-taking task. So that is why they have created one thing which is known as Azure SQL Managed Instance, which looks like that you have created a database on your own virtual machine, but without even managing that hardware platform. It is totally managed by Azure for you, and the compatibility of your application is very high. So you don't need to worry whether some feature is supported or not. And there is something in Azure that is known as Azure Hybrid Benefit, where what happens is if you have a license, if you have purchased it for on premises, you can actually bring that license on cloud and save on the licensing cost also, which is known as Azure Hybrid Benefit. So, and this is for like all of the services where there is some attached license to it. Well, guys, after this lab, we'll take a 15 minutes break. So let us start and like create a SQL database. So for first, what we have to do within your Azure inside your portal, you have to search for SQL databases, and we will create a database with the name of DB1. And we will also create a new server also, because all your databases, SQL Server databases actually lie inside your uh, servers. Yeah, I'll give this a name. Okay, so we already have one server. So I'm not creating a new. Otherwise, all you have to do, you can click on create new, and you can create a new server also here. So let me create one server for you. Okay, so we have to keep it unique. Okay. Okay, now we have to, yeah. So for the server, we can use this username password. So what I've done, I've created a new server. Okay, and yeah, once we have done with, we can keep other options as default. So in this, you can see that it is creating a server. So the UI has changed a bit. So instead of having uh, a separate screen, it actually takes you to a separate screen here. Okay, on the networking tab, what we have to do, we have to actually provide all the like chain these things. Like we have to check the connectivity method should be a public endpoint, because your we will be accessing this SQL database over the internet. And additionally, we will also add our current IP. Otherwise, later on, we will have some connecting to this will be a problem. So in the networking tab, I will click on public endpoint. I will allow Azure services and resource to access this thing. So if you disable this option, what happens, maybe if you have some other service which is trying to connect to your SQL database, it will not be able to connect it. Okay, and I'll also add my current client IP address. Okay, post that, we don't have to do anything. Okay, in order to reduce cost, we will just remove this thing, and we will also have an existing database. So we will have some sample database or data already loaded into the into our into our SQL database that we are creating. Yeah, I'll choose sample and yeah, this is the default collation and things. Then I don't think so. We have to do any configuration for this thing. So now it has started to create the. Then we'll run a query. Let me go and just copy that query for you guys. Junaid, yeah, you should use Azure Data Studio and these things because it is comparatively much easier if you're working with storage account. So it was not there in your labs, but yeah, you should use Azure Data Studio because going forward they will support that application also. Does it answer your question, Junaid? Okay, yeah. And it is you'll find it more convenient also. You can connect like 2 3 different storage accounts and directly just upload any file, or maybe if you want to see whether you got a file, you can directly just open an application rather than going to the portal and doing it. Sometimes like I use uh, like REST APIs, your PowerShell or Azure CLI. So if you get into that habit, it will take some time, but once you get into that habit, just running a quick command will also give you that thing. Another benefit of data studio is you can connect other your SQL databases and other things also to a similar same platform. So all your data you have a you can work at a with a single application. This demo is taking some time. Yeah, so finally we were our Azure SQL database got created, and you can see in the query editor. Let me just get the password from here. We should rather keep that password where. Okay, so if you'll go to this lab, actually I saved some of our time. So they did not add your current IP address in this lab, but what they did it at the end. Once if you will not do this thing, you will get an error when you will be on this screen. So then you will have to manually go back and do that thing. But what I did in the starting itself, I added my client IP. I have allowed traffic from my client IP to go through this database and do queries. Okay, so we did not have to do this part, and now we'll directly go and run the query on the data. So it's a simple join query where we are there is a product category table. We are joining the product category table with the product table, and we are getting the top 20 category names of with their product name. Okay, So red frames, this is a product category, and these are the top product from this particular category. And we are actually doing it for top 20 items for this thing. So yeah, so we are doing it on the sample data that was loaded, the AdventureWorks data. So that is very like famous and widely available. Guys, that's it. So let's take a 15 minutes break, and let me have my dinner, and we'll join then. Okay. Okay. Timer clock. What happened? Why am I not getting a time?
This conference will now be recorded. This
Database,
conference will now be recorded.
and how you can like we created a database also, the sample database, and we have queried the database also. Okay, post this thing, what happens is within Azure, there is a marketplace where your customers can actually find, try, purchase, and provision other application also from different vendors and different like pre-made solutions. So they are also there. So you can explore that thing also. You will have a lot of container open source stuff also there, your virtual machine and database images there. So if you have some pre-packaged image with all the softwares installed, so you can directly from the marketplace, you can deploy those images on your virtual machines also. Then application build, deployment software, developer tools, and there are a lot of things on the Azure marketplace for custom solutions that are created by other vendors also. Okay, so yeah, so in this module, what we have seen what is a global presence of Azure and Microsoft, what are Azure management tools, and then multiple services in the compute, networking, storage, and database segment. And at last, we came to know about that there is a Azure marketplace also, which is basically used to have other vendor solutions out there, which you can actually go ahead and use it. Okay, so we are done with module 2 with all the labs. Let me start with module 3. Okay, this is module 1. Let me just close this for now. Okay, so let me go to module. Let me see if there are any questions as of now. Okay, no questions. This is security. Why it is not opening this thing? Yeah, so module 3 is around the core solutions that are there in Azure. And so in this module, we'll see what are IoT and Azure to Azure Sphere. Then there are some pre-packaged your Synapse Analytics and Databricks. So Databricks is a Spark as a service sort of a solution where using your Spark programming language, you can build your in-memory solutions. And then you have Synapse Analytics, which is a complete analytics product where you have an enterprise data warehouse, as well as all the capabilities that you can think from an analytics service. So you can have Spark, you will have Synapse pipelines, which are similar to ADF pipelines, and you will have a data lake, all pre-packaged into a single analytics product. Then we have some of the AIML capabilities also. So Azure Machine Learning Studio and cognitive services. And there is a bot service also using which you can create bots also. After we are done with the core Azure solutions, we'll see some of the Azure management tools. So what is a portal? So we have already seen the portal. So and then you have PowerShell, CLI, and other management tools also, using which you can actually interact with the resources, or you can create resources, monitor them, and provision them. Then some of the other management tools is Azure Advisor. So looking at your infrastructure, what they will do, that they will give you recommendation that what changes that you can make in your Azure infrastructure. Then you have monitoring solution, which is known as Azure Monitor. So all your uh, if you have to monitor different resources, you can monitor through Azure Monitor. And then you have Service Health. So Service Health will actually tell you whether if there is any downtime expected in your downtime in any of the Azure services, what is the service health of a particular service on Azure. Okay, so first we'll see IoT in Azure solution. We'll see IoT hub. So like Internet of Things, what are the Internet of Things solution? What is an IoT hub, IoT Central, and Azure Spare? Then we'll see like these services. Okay, so Internet of Things, this is the ability for devices to garner and then relay information for data analysis. So you will have a lot of hardware devices. I don't know whether you guys know about Raspberry Pi. So it's a very small it is a very small system with its own CPU, RAM, and other things, where you can build your IoT solutions. Now, once you have those things like product ready, you want to obviously do some sort of data analysis on them. Maybe you want to you are actually collecting all the data from all these IoT devices on a single place, or you after you've collected this data, you want to build some sort of analytics over them. So, but in order to do that, first thing that you will need is to connect with these IoT resources. So for first, there is a service which is known as Azure IoT Central. It's a SaaS-based solution of connecting, monitoring, and managing your IoT assets. So here it's a SaaS-based solution. So you do not you cannot build any applications or any other things. All of those things are already there. But the plus point of this thing is you don't need to make an application. So all you will have to do is connect your whatever IoT assets your organization have. You can directly connect them to your Azure IoT Central. Then comes your Azure IoT Hub. So this is a managed service which is hosted in the cloud, and it is like a PaaS service where what you do, you create devices, and then maybe you will connect your Raspberry Pi or different IoT devices to that IoT hub. And once you have that data that connected to your IoT hub, you can actually relay, you will have a bi-directional communication between your IoT application and the devices that manage it. And then comes Azure Sphere. So it is more on your secure way of high-level application platform. With there is inbuilt communication and security features which are already present for connected devices. So Azure Sphere is a more secure, security-based solution for your IoT devices. Okay, so first of this lab is to create an IoT hub, and then we are using so Azure has created a Raspberry Pi simulator, which we will actually use to connect to our IoT hub. So let me go to the, let me see if there are any questions first. Okay, yeah, no questions so far. Yeah, this is, yeah, this one. So within your Azure portal, the service that you have to search for is IoT hub, and then we will create a new IoT hub. Yeah, let me bring this name also. I'll choose the resource group. I'll give this IoT hub a name. So yeah, after this, we don't have to make any, we just have to change the pricing tier to standard tier, and then we can create the Azure IoT hub instance. Yeah, so it is already there. So there are different pricing tiers. So there is a free tier, a standard. So we'll use the standard tier only, and you will get these all these like what is the cost per month, how many messages you can have, and what is a defender. So there is an Azure defender for your IoT edge for your security solutions. Yeah, so you can see the validation and thing is passed. I'll create an Azure IoT hub now. So this is a big service, guys. It will take some time to create. Can you explain me what? Okay, yeah, Jen. I'll. So, Jen, have you heard about Internet of Things, IoT? Have you heard? No, Jen, I don't. I will show you the simulator, but even I don't know Raspberry Pi coding. It's mostly done by the IoT engineers. So there is a separate role for that. But I will show you a simulator which Azure has created, and we'll connect that, and so you can go through that code. But I actually I've never coded in Raspberry Pi, but I know that how to connect Raspberry Pi to Azure and how to collect that data, all of those things. Uh, okay, yeah. So let this create. Meanwhile, let me show you the simulator that they have. Okay, after this, we will actually add a device, and once we have the device ready, we'll get the connection string for it. And then there is a simulator. This is the simulator. Okay, so let us just put it away. So this is how this is a .NET code only that is there. So what will this do? That it will simply send some message. I don't know why my screen is behaving weirdly. So this is a .NET code which does that. Uh, all we will have to do is mention the device connection string here. I don't know why. Guy, is my screen flickering on this website? Okay, it's just this website. Yeah, after this, what we have to do, we have to add, go to the device section, click on add device, and we will add our device. So we'll name this as my Raspberry Pi. Yeah, I'll click on that device. So a new device has been created. Now I'll go inside this device, and you can see there is a primary connection string that I will just keep it. So using this connection string, I will connect my Raspberry Pi from the simulator with my Azure IoT Hub so that it can relay data over here. So let me just copy this thing, close this thing first. Okay, after this, all we have to do, we have to just uh, in our simulator, we just have to change the connection string to the connection string of our device. So I will, okay. Yeah, so this is the connection string. I'll just click on run. Okay, so you can see that these messages are being sent to the IoT hub. Okay, and okay, so because now we have sent enough data, what I'll do, I'll just click on stop. It will stop sending that data. So you can see that sample has been stopped, and what basically what it is sending is it is sending temperature and humidity to this Azure IoT hub. Okay, and once you have that, so once we'll go back to the Azure portal, and in the hub overview, you will see in your IoT usage, you will see that how many success messages and device and other things that we actually got from the simulator. So here we are. Let me go to IoT hub. So it will take some time for the information to reflect here. Just let me. Okay, so you can see 14 messages were sent, 14 messages were used today. So you'll start seeing those messages also here. Okay, so now you can see that it is showing that. So we had a spike here. So these were the total number of messages that were used. So these were the same messages that were sent by our IoT hub. And there are various services also where you can directly get those messages that were sent onto your Azure IoT hub in a storage account like the one we created. And once you get that data there, then you can use that data for uh, any analysis purposes. And in advanced solutions, you will have stream analytics solutions also, where you will directly get the data into IoT hub. You will read the data, maybe do some sort of windowing mechanism where you are building some predictive model, and using that predictive model, you can actually take some informed decision through these IoT devices. Okay, so this was our exercise for IoT hub. So I'll delete it later. Okay, now we have to. Okay, so we have seen how to create an IoT hub, add an IoT device, and how you test the device using the Raspberry Pi simulator. Okay, for big data analytics we actually have these three major services that are there. So first is your Azure Synapse Analytics. Synapse is a cloud-based enterprise data warehouse. So if you're looking for any EDW solutions, you should go for Azure Synapse Analytics, and mostly SQL-based EDW solution. So within your Synapse Analytics, you have dedicated SQL pools which are like your big data uh, like big data clusters where you can have like distributed tables on your platform and other things. Then you have Azure HD Insight. So it's an fully managed open source analytics service for enterprise. It's actually Hadoop ecosystem. Azure HD Insight is an SLA backed Hadoop ecosystem for your big data workloads. So if you are looking for any Hadoop based solution like Kafka messaging system or Pig Hive or Cassandra, so you can spin up an Azure HD Insight cluster, and within that you can use whatever big data or Hadoop based analytics that you want to use. Then you have Azure Databricks. So actually, Databricks is a separate product. It's very famous these days for Spark-based processing, and they also provide their services under Azure. So they will be using compute from Azure, and they will be creating your Azure Databricks service there. So it's an Apache Spark-based analytics service. So this is completely Spark-based. Your Synapse has both SQL as well as Spark. Your Azure HD Insight is your Hadoop based analytics service. Okay, after this you have for your AI and machine learning. So the three major services are your Azure Machine Learning Studio. So this is a cloud-based platform where you can develop, train, and deploy machine learning models. Then you have pre-packaged models. So cognitive services is Azure Cognitive Services are those services where Microsoft or Azure, they've already trained some advanced model on their own data, and now what they are doing, they are actually renting out those cognitive services as REST APIs on a pay-per-use model. So if I give you an example, if you want to do image classification, or maybe uh, there is a scenario where you want to do face detection and other things, you can directly spin up a cognitive service account, cognitive service face detection service, and what it will do, all you will have to do, understand the SDK bit, and then the moment you send in a image of a face, it will be able to detect face, your emotion, and all of those things. It will return you back. But for every API request that you make, you will incur some charges. So in this case, you do not need to train any machine learning or AI models that are needed. But in Azure Machine Learning Studio, you can create your own machine learning models, deploy them on cloud or any place. Okay, then you have Azure bot services. So your bot services are nothing but creating your intelligent and enterprise grade bots. So through a very UI driven manner, you can design a bot, and you can actually create uh, enterprise ready bot solution, and you can also integrate a bot service with machine learning studio models and cognitive services also. So that can also be done. Serverless computing we have already seen in the first module. So you have serverless computing through Azure Functions and Azure Logic Apps. Logic Apps is more on the orchestration and workflow management side, while Azure Function is more on the event-based code running for your service. So if you have any event on which you want to run a code without managing any serverless scale up, scale down issues, go for Azure Function. If you are trying to automate and orchestrate some task, when I say automate a task, maybe it could be the moment you get any email in your Outlook thing, maybe you are reading that email, doing some machine learning NLP model, and then maybe classifying that email in some category. And so the such type of business processes or workflows, if you are trying to automate, then they are done through Azure Logic Apps. And if you are building some event-based code solution, then this is done through your Azure Functions. Okay, now we'll start with Azure Functions demo. Okay, yeah. Before that, I want to explain you what is the difference between a function and function app. Let me see if there is any questions. Is there any way I can practice these labs? Okay, is there any way I can practice lab without using company Azure account we have? And I don't have student account. Does K21 provide us any? Okay, so Shavanti, I guess Muskan or Izhar can help you with that. Whether because I guess then they will have to create a Azure account for you. So maybe they can actually help you out with this. Um, you can connect with Muskan and Izhar. You can take Shavanti's question. She actually would need some Azure account access. So yeah, if we have, if we can do that for them. Okay, additionally, there is a question from Junaid. Question regarding storage account. Can you give a brief explanation of the difference between the types of redundancies while creating? Okay, so Junaid, so what will happen? Yeah, guys. So maybe you can separately connect with Muskan and Izar for that for your student account. Maybe she can help you with that. Otherwise, if you guys have your credit cards, you can actually create a free tier $100 account. So free tier account. So you can refer to this link. Maybe it will be of help to all of you guys. So using your own credit card, what you can do, you can create an account. You will get $100 credit, and post that $100 credit, obviously you will incur charges, but most of the time those $100 are sufficient for practice. I guess this will be helpful. Okay, to answer Junaid question, so there are locally there are different redundancies level. The difference between those redundancy levels are, if you are going for locally resident LRS type of redundancy level, then your data will be maintained in a single data center only. But now if you are replicating your if it's a geo redundant storage, then within a geographical boundary your storage account and all the data will be replicated. So there will be inbuilt redundancies that will be there. The benefit of those things is this, that maybe assume that there is a region failure or there is a data center failure, and you had a maybe you had a LRS sort of redundancy set for your storage account, your services will be affected. But assume if you had created a storage account with geo redundant storage, then there will be then that storage account will be replicated in some other region also. So then you can use till the even if there is a store disaster in one of the region where your primary region where your storage account was there, but you can always spin up uh, your services won't be affected because you are already using redundancy in a geo redundant manner. So I guess Junaid, that answers your question. Okay, yeah. So guys, Pradyuman has actually yeah he has actually given you the link for a step by step guide for your cloud account access. Okay, so let us see whether we'll be able to do this lab. Okay, so first we have to create a function app. So every function, Azure function, lies inside a function app. So within a function app, there could be multiple functions. So first task for us to is to create a So we'll use a .NET app because the code that we'll be using is a .NET app, and all other things we will keep it as simple. So version we'll choose a version 3.1, and the region will be East US region, where we will be deploying our resources. Okay, after this, what we have to do, we can create a function app now, and once we have the function app like created, inside the function app, we'll create a new function. So this is creating a function app. Okay, so we have it is provisioning a function app for me. Meanwhile, I'll just tell you what we will be doing in the lab. So we will be creating an HTTP triggered function. So a function could be triggered in different ways. It could be blob triggered. So the moment you have any file in your storage account blob container, you want that an Azure function should get triggered. So that is known as a blob triggered event. Then there is an HTTP triggered function. So HTTP triggered function are just like your APIs, where you can directly call them, and what it will do, uh, it will automatically run the function, and whatever the response that it wants to give, it will give back to the user. Okay, so this is still creating meanwhile, let me check if there are why are function apps usually deployed in Linux image, can we actually deploy it in Windows image? Yes, you can. There is no thing. So it depends upon what is the underlying architecture on which they are deployed. And Jayant, if you'll see Python function apps, they are no more supported in Windows image. They are supported in Linux image only. So you can check that. So maybe the language that you're working in, maybe that is .NET. No doubt you can work with Windows, but Python, like like I was working like maybe 2-3 months back, they only support Linux images as such. So and for them, you will have to connect to VS Code and other things, and then you will have to actually work. And Linux, obviously, the cost of your Linux storage will also be less. If you will be doing it on a Windows image, then yeah, there will be some licensing cost that behind the scene Azure will be charging with you. Okay, so within your functions, you can now what we have to do is we have to create an HTTP triggered function. So let me close this thing. So in your functions, you have to click on create. It will we will create a new new function, and this will be an HTTP triggered function, mind you. So because we want to call this function through the web browser, so what we will do, we will create an HTTP triggered function. But you can see there are so many different types of functions that you can create. A timer triggered, queues triggered, service bus triggered, and service bus topic triggered. So you can have different types of functions there. So let me just guys, just you will have to be we are already over with the time, but let me just close this lab. Yeah, so they would have already created a sample code for us. So you can write any .NET if you guys know .NET. So you can write .NET codes here. In the starting, if you are like working with different language, so you can use different languages also. Like I personally prefer Python a lot. So I mostly write my Azure functions in Python. So you can see what they have created. They have created an uh, .NET code, which basically, if you send any request in the request query, it will return you back. So I will show you what to do. Yeah, so from this you can get the function URL using which you will actually use to call this function, and then yeah, and then all we have to do is we have to actually call. We can call this from any browser. And currently, if you see, I have not added any query. But you can see it is asking me to pass a name in the query. So all we have to do is we have to add this at the end of this query. You have to append your name. So you can append any name. I'll append my name as Sagar K21. So you can see that it is my Azure function is actually parsing this thing for me, and it is running some code behind the scene. So you can simulate a lot of things through your Azure functions. So you can see whatever name I passed. So it is actually running in a serverless fashion, and it is the result has been appended and returned back as a response to me. Okay, after this, okay. So you can monitor your function apps also. So if in your Azure portal, so there is a monitor section also that so your all your executions, whether they were successful or not, you can find them at in your monitor tab here. And it generally takes some times to populate this thing. So uh, don't worry, it will eventually get populated, because this is all of this is connected to application inside. So there is there the logs are created, and then slowly they will move to application inside, and from application inside they'll be moved to this screen. So yeah, they'll be eventually here, guys. Okay, so all your execution, whether they were success or failure, you can see it over here also. So let me. So maybe I'll show that thing to you guys tomorrow. Okay. Oh, okay. So Junaid, I'll just check with the like K20 gun guys, and I'll inform you. Most probably we should have it tomorrow, and I'll see my availability. If it's on Friday, you'll come to know by tomorrow.
Yes, we have a session tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Bye bye. Good night.